Yeah, it's really exciting today on Carnivore Conversations to have Charles Mayfield, who is the founder of Farrow Skincare. And Farrow Skincare was born from his professional accomplishments as a risk consultant for food companies, healthy food author, and advocate for regenerative farming practices. We're going to have a lot to talk about, I can tell. Pharaoh is the first lard-based skincare company in the U.S. and is gaining momentum as people experience the incredible healing power of SmartLard technology for human skin. And Pharaoh is based out of Eastern Tennessee and contains no chemicals, preservatives, or water in any of its handcrafted products. Charles, welcome and thank you for being here with us today. Appreciate it.
It's an absolute pleasure to be here, Dr. Kiltz, and certainly appreciate the opportunity to chew the fat, as we say.
Well, maybe just start off by telling a little bit about yourself, where you're at, and how'd you get into the skincare business?
Great question. So I'm yes, as you said in the intro, I live in East Tennessee. I was born and raised here. Migrated to Atlanta, Georgia for college way back a while ago. Graduated from Georgia Tech in 1997, and really career-wise, jumped into the insurance and financial services industry. Fast forward, decade and a half or so, and ran into the CrossFit scene. I'm sure many of your listeners are familiar with that. That ultimately introduced me to a guy by the name of Rob Wolf, and so sort of found CrossFit. Was introduced to paleo as a dietary sort of ethos. And so I've co-authored a number of cookbooks in that space, in the paleo cookbook space, and the paleo world sort of ultimately introduced me to some folks like Joel Saddleton with Polyface Farms and Will Harris. Some of the folks in the sort of on the leading edge of regenerative ag got me totally hooked on farming. And so in 2016, moved back to East Tennessee, where I'm from, with sort of lofty aspirations of getting into regenerative farming. I also made a return back into sort of the insurance and risk mitigation world at that point, having seen, and we can talk about that a little bit later, but just sort of the needs in the emerging food and agriculture and product space as it relates to sort of this, again, sort of burgeoning carnivore, paleo, keto community. Mm-hmm. And had an absolutely nasty sunburn back in 2019 that in sort of an act of desperation and curiosity, I treated the sunburn with some lard, and lo and behold, it really my sunburn was gone in a matter of days, and then I never peeled. And we have a story on our website about that. But that was the sort of the watershed moment. I looked around, started playing around, making some creams in my kitchen, and I call it, Dr. Kiltz, I call it my paleo lens, right? If you can't pronounce the ingredients, you don't eat it. And if it comes in a box and doesn't spoil, you probably shouldn't put it in your mouth. And when I shined that lens over on skincare, having had this sort of awesome moment of healing, if you will, it's like, man, the skincare world is more toxic than the food world. And who would have ever thought that? And so, just tinkered around with recipes and various concoctions, and settled on a recipe. I probably sent 1,500, 2,000 little samples out to, I was farming at the time. So we were growing pigs and beef and chicken for customers. And so when I dropped off some pork chops, I'd drop off a little jar of this stuff and try it out. And so, we launched Pharaoh in January of 2022. And here we are. Met you at KetoCon this past year, which was an absolute pleasure. And so, it's fun to circle back around with you and talk about the origin story of Pharaoh and sort of some of the nefarious things going on in skincare.
Well, skincare is humongous, and maybe you talk a little bit about the problems of skincare in general, and why is it so toxic potentially, and people continue to run for something that maybe isn't the best for them. And since I'm in the fertility world, I know reproduction. One of the problems is cosmetics and many skincare products contain some endocrine disrupting chemicals. And why do you think the lard based is something we should all be looking towards?
Great question. Well, we can start at the beginning there. The skincare industry at large is full of toxicity, and a complete lack of consumer protection. So the governing act or governmental act regulation that I guess is the gatekeeper of consumer safety for cosmetics is the Food and Cosmetics Act of 1938. And when that act was written, many moons ago, we're coming up on almost the centennial anniversary of that act.
Yeah.
There were only two at the time. This is 1938, right? At the time, there were only two ingredients, really one, that required pre-market safety testing by the manufacturer, and those were color additives. And if again, it's very hard for most of us to relate to anything in 1938. Most folks are long gone from those times. But
Yeah.
if you fast forward to today, and they have updated since the 1938 Act, they have updated that legislation twice. Both times excluded cosmetics. So this is under the FDA. This is food safety and various other consumer safety guidelines. And so, by and large, most of the consumer protection, if you will, around cosmetics today has more to do with labeling and making sure the ingredients are on the package and the address and things of that nature. It's got very little to do with consumer safety. And I would add to that in 1938, it's arguable that the most toxic things we could have put on our skin back then were color additives. If you think about what we were, a derivative from maybe charcoal or tar, think about where we get color from in nature. But you fast forward now, and if you look at some of these polyphenols and phthalates and parabens and all these chemicals that we've been able to manufacture and petroleum derivatives, most of skincare today is dominated by a waste product in the petroleum industry. And so, the environment that our skin comes in contact with now versus 100 or certainly 1,000 years ago is very, very different. And so the line I like to draw in the sand with people and consumer products and skincare is water-based. Mm-hmm. And I can briefly explain why. So when I first started playing with lard, I had this sunburn moment. I was like, man, this is amazing. And so you go to the Google and you type in, how do I make skincare? And you take water, distilled water, you take a fat, usually it was shea butter or coconut, some fat is on the other end of the equation, and an emulsifier in between. And you heat them all up and mix them together, and here's your amazingly luscious cream. And they were, my early creams were just out of this world until about 7 to 10 days later, they would turn black and go rancid because the water in that mixture, right, was food for any airborne bacteria that, floats around in the air. We're around bugs all the time. We're covered in them.
Right.
And so, so a water-based cream, which is 99% of them, is going to have compounds and chemicals in it that kill bacteria. Okay. And in addition to those compounds, which they may or may not be endocrine disrupting, but usually are, you've also got other compounds for, fragrances and all these artificial chemically derived compounds. And so our skin and our GI tract, our entire existence coexists with, billions upon billions of microscopic organisms. We're covered in bugs. And so these water-based creams are not only disrupting our internal endocrine system, mm-hmm. due to the signaling and mostly estrogen signaling, but also they're killing our natural microbiome. And so why is lard better?
Yes.
I would say a couple things. So lard is, I've seen a couple of papers on this. It's going to be hard to find a double-blind placebo study on lard, similar to keto, although you're seeing some keto carnivore studies now. But what I have read is that lard is the closest natural compound to human sebum, which is the natural oil that our glands in our dermis produce to moisturize and lock in the moisture in our skin. And so it aligns very well with human biology. You alluded to in the intro the SmartLard, and I know we'll talk about what is SmartLard. Well, you have to raise a healthy, happy pig for their fat to be healthy. Pigs are monogastric animals. Pigs are four-legged humans. You're a doctor. Phil Ovady is a good friend of mine. He's a heart surgeon. I think you and Phil probably know each other pretty well. And I joke with Phil all the time because he uses pig parts to fix human bodies. Right.
That's right.
The biology. Right. That's right.
Very similar.
We train our surgeons on pigs. Right. We train our surgeons. We use pigs to derive natural hormones. If you're into, testosterone replacement therapy, a lot of times you can harvest that from the glands of a male pig. I mean, there's all sorts of biological match between humans and pigs. And so if you raise a healthy, happy pig that has the sun, pigs metabolize vitamin D from the sun the same way humans do, and so their fat is just chock full of nutrients. The trifecta in skincare is vitamins A, E, and D. You could probably throw vitamin C in there as well. So you've got that as a sort of a magic pill for optimal human skin, or those 3 or 4 vitamins. And then on top of that, you've got lipid balance. How do the ratios of lard match up not only in pH balance, but also the ratios of monounsaturated, polyunsaturated, and saturated fats. And it's literally a spot on match. So lard is the human skin is the lock, and lard is the key.
Question about lard and pigs, and I'm going to ask a little about their diet on your farm, and how is that different from most pigs' diet under most industrial production?
Great question. So there's a big argument going on right now with pork specifically, not only as a foodstuff, but obviously we're gonna edge over into skincare, about polyunsaturated fatty acid content. And so we fed our pigs a soy-free, non-GMO diet. And so that's the level of quality that I found great success with, not only as a food stuff, the taste, flavor, texture, of the meat, but it seems to work very well in producing a quality fat, not only for cooking, but also for skincare. Have I had it tested in a lab? Nope, I have not. But I will certainly stand by a pastured pig. And so with any animal, you know this, Dr. Kiltz, you have 2 big environmental exposures. You have diet over here. What am I ingesting? And then you have your environmental diet. Am I getting sun? Am I getting play? Am I getting fresh air, fresh water? In the case of a pig, am I getting fresh pasture and dirt? The pigs will root and obtain in a production model, which is, I would say, more than a couple pigs in your backyard, 50 pigs, 100 pigs. In a production model, you have to feed those pigs, right? So you bring in a quality feed to give them, but you're also giving them access to the land. And what do they get there? They dig up grubs and nuts, and they're probably eating a half a pound of dirt a day that's full of microbes and various what I would call micronutrients, that's sort of like the mineral supplement for humans. And so you have to balance both of those. A pig would not be very healthy if you fed it the perfect diet and kept it in a house where it didn't have the sun and grew up on concrete. That would not be a healthy pig. I would almost rather trade in optimal environment and less optimal food, right? I think humans are the same way. Like, you give human plenty of sunshine and some exercise and fresh water, if they're eating okay, they're going to be fairly healthy. So that's what we fed our pigs, and that's the standard that we use when we acquire food fat from other farms is a pasture-based model, soy-free, non-GMO.
Which is, I think, the most important thing. And I'm just curious because the skin of the external skin, the GI skin, contains a lot of microbes, and I'm not sure those are so good for us. And I'm just wondering if the fat from the skincare you offer may be healthier because it reduces the microbe count. And it's kind of interesting. And I'm wondering, is standard skincare, you mentioned water-based, but are there also plant-based products in that, whether they be plant oils or other plant phytochemicals or antigens that may also be part of that cream?
Yeah. So I would, if I were to make a guess, the skincare market at large, I would say that 95 to 96% of the market in terms of products is some form of water-based product. Now, on the other end of that water, you may have a coconut oil or an olive oil or some plant-based oil as the fat ingredient. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would say, okay, so 95% is water-based. I would say 4 to 4.5% of the market is, I would call it a water-free product that is plant-based. So your shea butters, your coconut, the skincare industry is a lot like the diet industry. You get on Google and the next thing you know, you're just confused. And so, there's a lot of coconut oil products. There's a lot of plant-based products. If you look in the historic literature, we've been fascinated with skincare for millennia. The Egyptians were heralded for their, addiction to golden skin and all these various, and a lot of that were plant-based oils, olive oils and things like that. So we've been fascinated with skin health and skin glowiness, if you will, for forever. I would make the argument as well that for thousands of years, pick a random human out of the population anywhere on the planet, that human was in contact on a very regular basis with animal fat because they were hunting and gathering and eviscerating and turning a dead animal into something on the spit. And so we've whether we knew it or not, our skin has had contact with visceral and subcutaneous animal fat for forever, barring really the last 150 years. I mean, if you look even back to the turn of the century, late 1800s, there's a reason Crisco, the famous seed oil, there's a reason it's white, because when Procter & Gamble developed this, they looked around and the preeminent cooking fat of the time was lard. I have a collection. My cousin actually has a collection of antique lard tins from the turn of the century. And it would blow your mind. This is pre-refrigeration. This is air conditioning. This is lots of things. And there's, literally 50, 120, 10, 12, 15 pound tins of lard. And so lard at room temperature, for your listeners that don't know, is white. And so when Crisco came out in the early 1900s, they dyed it white and started their marketing campaign as the latest and greatest cooking fat. And so I think I answered your question, but
you did. I mean, this is fascinating. The stories are critical because where did we get this idea that we should shift from animal fats to plant fats, both in what we eat and what we put on our skin? And I think what I was trying to get to is that water dries the skin. When you put water on it, it evaporates and then it dries the skin. And then many of the products, the cosmetic products, the moisturizing products contain plant oils, or which are seed oils, which are also antigenic. Think of seeds and nuts are the most antigenic part of what we get, we have allergies to. And so if our cosmetic products and our skincare products are containing the very thing that most of us are allergic to, we don't realize that. And there are a lot of sugars, I imagine, that come with the breakdown of the other plant products, which then feeds the microbes in our skin. It's kind of a vicious cycle. And I'm just curious what your experience has been with people utilizing your skincare products and the lard products, and then maybe you can tell us a little bit about your particular products and how they can be used.
Yeah, first of all, the experiences have been numerous and all over the board. Everyone loves our products for a variety of different reasons. You brought up a couple of things. Water dries our skin out. Absolutely does. If you've ever gotten out of the ocean or the swimming pool and just stood there for a minute, the evaporative process will people will put a water-based skincare product on their skin and it goes on wet, and then 30 seconds later it's dry, and the conventional wisdom is, oh, it's soaked into my skin. That's not what just happened. What just happened was all of the water that was emulsified into that product just evaporated. And if anyone understands how evaporative cooling works, it not only evaporated off your skin, it clung to any moisture that was near the surface of your skin and pulled it with it, right? So that's not good. Yeah, I mean, in terms of where we're making an impact, you have to be careful about claims and whatnot. And so I'm not making any claims, but just experiences.
People's experiences.
Yeah,
that's a good one. That's all you could share.
Yeah,
right.
That's right. So people's experiences. So there's two sides to the skin trouble market. You got sort of acute skin conditions, and then you've got chronic skin conditions. So we'll start on the acute side of the house. For me personally, I haven't had razor burn in 3 years. So, that's a common acute, here and gone, back maybe down the road skin condition. I haven't had razor burn. I know it's highly effective at what I would call mitigating and relieving sunburn, and actually reducing the impact of peeling. Again, that was the miracle for me, is when I never peeled. I mean, Doc, I was lobster red. This is one of those epic sunburns, right? And so, on the acute side of the house, acne. Some acne could be classified as chronic, but some not. Acne's, there's a million different causes for acne, but one of those is an overproduction of sebum. We should fold this into our conversation. We over sanitize. We soap up. Now, you're a doctor, you work in a clinical setting, I'm sure the washing and sanitizing is part of your regular day, but as a general population, the toxicity in skin cleaning and sanitizing products is absurd. And so we've been convinced that, we should soap and scour and sanitize so much. And when we do that, we're stripping natural oils off of our skin. And so, the body wants to be in a state of homeostasis. It's going to send signals. Oh my gosh, we need to produce more oil. And so a lot of acne is reduced. We've gotten stories from acne being relieved by sort of getting back to the balance,
Which I'd actually, if I may just make a comment about that, because animal fat suppresses microbe, which suppresses the inflammation caused by the microbial growth on our skin. See, I think the excessive microbes in our skin and in our gut are not good for us. the microbiome is actually ultimately the cause of disease and not good for us, even though people say it is. And so the sebum that our body makes reduces the microbes and kills them, because the immune system requires fat to function properly. And there was a recent study I read that fed cows coconut oil or castor oil, 30% of their diet, and the cows died. It turns out the oils from the coconut and the castor bean actually suppressed the microbes and killed them, and cows can't live without the microbes in their ruminant. And so my suspicion is, in our case, we don't have a ruminating gut, so the microbes are actually not good for us. But the same thing goes on our skin, because acne and many of the diseases related are all secondary to the proliferation of the microbes, which likely is secondary to the disruption of the sebum, the natural oils in our skin, which are animal fats. Technically, they're not plant oils, they're animal. And so that's where I'm betting the real benefit comes, if that makes any sense.
It does. I'm gonna nudge you a little bit there, because I love this thread, because these bugs. Okay, I like to rewind the clock. We have been coexisting with a human microbiome for as long as we have existed.
True.
In fact, you could argue there's a lot of data around long-term immunity problems for children that don't have vaginal births. So, the coming down the vaginal canal during birth is literally covering that infant in its first, call it environmental exposure, which is all the different microbes, that inhabit the mother's vaginal canal. And they've done some really fascinating studies there. So I completely agree with you in that a disruption of what we'll call an ideal human microbiome is very detrimental to our health on a number of levels. And so I do agree that the microbiome has a role, okay? And we are doing so much destruction. Again, back to these compounds in our skincare, these preservatives in our food, that the food that sits on a shelf for a year has things in that food that kill bacteria. Okay, and so it is my belief that we have disrupted and encouraged overgrowth of various poor if you look at the small intestinal and SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, a lot of this stuff is driven by either sugar consumption. I would argue there's a role being played by the preservatives that we're consuming that get down there and disrupt our gastrointestinal microbiome. So I agree with you that we need to be very respectful and mindful of these co-inhabitants, and we need to do everything we can not to piss them off, if I may.
But it's very interesting, because if you think about it, we're studying the microbiome in a plant-based, low-fat environment. And so if you look at James Henry Salisbury's work, Salisbury State guy, he showed that the microbes proliferate in the gut and they're killing us. They go out the rectum, up into the vagina, likely the skin and the penis, same thing, get up into our GI tract and go everywhere. They go up through the esophagus, and they go up into the upper respiratory and lower respiratory system. And so ultimately, the microbes are proliferating because of a plant-based lean meat diet, because microbes ferment amino acids and sugars. So the lack of fat is not suppressing the microbes. So the idea of good and bad bacteria, microbes, I think it's a fallacy that we've been duped, because how can a bacteria be good or bad? Maybe they're bad because we allow the inflammatory environment to proliferate because of lean meat, plants, low fat. back to no animal fat, where we might have had a better suppression of the microbes in our gut. We were highly exposed to these things. If you wounded yourself, they break through the skin covering. I burnt myself a couple of weeks ago, and the skin covering was removed, and it was very red and swollen. It took a couple of weeks to heal, and even a small little opening, which is the sugar coating that protects me, gets damaged because of the plant-based low animal fat diet. If simply people would add fat to the inside, this is where I think you have some really interesting comments, that you need to add the fat to the outside, not plant oils, animal fat. And it's interesting, when I was a teenager, I used to have terrible eczema and psoriasis to my hands. I mean, they were peeling, they were red. I would put lanolin, which comes from sheep, and gloves, and literally in a few days it would heal up and be fine. Now, I actually don't know the cause, but I had migraines, arthritis, all sorts of disorders as a young child that, it just happened to be it proliferated in my hands and my skin, but it was a lack of animal fat. And adding skincare products. Now, maybe you could tell us what your skincare products are, because I want to share that with everyone to make sure people get a chance to listen, because we're here to share not only the stories of lard, but why Farrow Skincare looks and sounds so beneficial that I think we all should look at it more. Dr. Rob Kiltz, another beautiful, spectacular day. And I just want to send thanks to all those for watching the newest episode of Carnivore Conversations. Be sure to follow us on Spotify, Apple Music, and other streaming platforms to gain access to the full 1-hour episode. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more to come. God bless.